Hello and welcome to the 495 podcast. I'm your host, Doug Sparks. This is brought to you by Merrimack Valley Magazine. This is the first ever official version. We did sort of a trial run.
Official version.
Yeah. We did a trial run or a number of trial runs before, but now we're doing it for real. And before we introduce our guest, I believe we have an Ask the Editor question.
We haven't asked the editor question. I'm going to start right with this.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is a good one. This is an important one. What's the best cup of coffee easily accessed off of $4.95?
Right.
Appropriate for the $4.95.
Appropriate. And as with all these things, it seems like a simple question, but I'm gonna dig into it a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's also hard because
We did 40 minutes on tea earlier.
we did 40 minutes on tea. It's hard because good is sort of like, there are places I go where the coffee isn't great, but I love that place. I want to sit there with a book. And there's places I go because the coffee's fantastic. And then there's places in between. There's places I go because it's close to the house. Places I go where people are nice to me. So it's like good is it sort of depends. I would say.
First of all, put your name to this. Introduce yourself,
okay.
Doug Sparks.
Okay, thank you.
Tell
I'm Doug
people who you
Sparks,
are.
editor-in-chief of Merrimack Valley Magazine.
So everyone knows who to blame.
Yeah. And the reason why somebody's asking me a coffee question is I used to work in the coffee industry. I write a lot about food and coffee and tea, things like that. So I would say easily accessible from $4.95. There's a whole bunch of places that I really like. And then I'll talk about what I think is the best just pure cup of coffee.
Yep.
Brewed Awakening, I love. I love Java Room in Chelmsford. Battlegrounds, which is right off the highway in Lawrence, and Herald. I don't know if you guys have been there yet.
Been to the Haverhill one, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a new one in Lawrence,
Yep.
and also in Lawrence, El Taller, which is a place that I don't think as many people outside of Lawrence know about, but I've had fantastic cups of coffee there. It's also a bookstore. So if you haven't been to El Taller in downtown Lawrence, that place is definitely worth checking out. It's right by NECO.
Mm-hmm.
It's right by Northern Essex Community College. Plum Island, if I'm out in Newburyport, is where I'll go. Our office is in Methuen. So the place where I usually go around here is I'll go to the coffee factory in Salem, New Hampshire. They roast in-house. They have really, really good coffee. I don't
Wait a
know
second.
if you guys...
Let's go back to Newburyport. Plum
Yep.
Island Coffee Roasters?
Yep, Plum Island Coffee
Or the
Roasters.
commune, same people.
Yep.
Yeah.
I tend to go to Plum Island Coffee Roasters
Yep.
just because of the location. I like sitting outside and looking
Yeah.
at the water. It's a great location. The coffee's really good there too.
Yeah.
I would say the best cup of coffee in the valley. It's not close to $4.95. The best cup of coffee in the valley is at Flight, which is a roaster up in Bedford, New Hampshire. And the reason why you haven't been there, it's not a cafe.
No?
It's a roaster. But what they do is Saturday mornings, they do free tastings for the public. So you can go, show up, and they'll give you a bunch of coffee. And that place is that's a national level, fantastic roaster there. So if you're a coffee nerd, really, really worth checking out. You're not going to sit there with a book. You're not going to sit there with your laptop and get work done. It's a roaster, and it looks like a science lab. But as far as just a pure cup of coffee, I would go to Flight.
So being non-initiated, a roaster is, I'm guessing, where they roast beans.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, they roast the beans, which are seeds. Everybody calls them beans. I call them beans. But remember, it's a fruit, and it's a seed from a fruit.
With a particular
And those guys
technique.
know what they're those guys know what they're doing up there, for sure.
Okay. What are they doing that's different?
What are they doing that's different?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So we'll dig in on this. There's a number of waves of coffee, right? You kind of have a first wave, second wave. Second wave you think of as like Starbucks, where people started paying attention to quality, right? Started paying attention a little bit to terroir, where the coffee was from. And then the third wave is when terroir and quality become really, really important. And what happened at that point is people started roasting lighter, because when you have cheap beans, you want to roast them dark to mask imperfections.
Right.
All right? So but when you have good beans, really, really high quality stuff, they're naturally sweet. So you start easing off the roasting process. It's a lot more delicate. More can go wrong. It's a little bit more expensive. So this is third wave, and Flight is just a great example of third wave coffee roasting. Now we're kind of moving into the fourth wave, people say, which is when it gets even sort of crazier and sustainability issues come to the forefront and fair trade and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But in a sense, the really, really good coffee is still dominated by what they call the third wave coffee roasters right now. Now, still doesn't mean it's the most enjoyable cup of coffee, because the most enjoyable cup of coffee is the one where you're sitting at Brewed Awakening, seeing your friends, saying hi to everybody, listening to good music, and enjoying yourself.
Hitting a deadline, right, Dean?
Hitting a deadline.
When
and
you finally finish the piece.
I've written more than one letter from the editor from Brewed Awakening, where I start in the notebook. I'm sitting here at Brewed Awakening, writing in my notebook, wondering what I'm going to do with this one. So I've gotten some creativity there. So where do you? I'll introduce you. This is Dean Johnson, and we'll start before we talk about who you are and what you do and all that good stuff. Are you a coffee drinker? Remind me.
I am,
Okay.
but I, as I tell people, I'm sort of, and I'm referring to myself in this case. I'm not a serious coffee drinker. I like stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff
Right.
in my coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at Brewed Awakening, I don't want to brag, but they used to have a drink named after me.
Really?
At Brewed Awakening, when I used to work in a place where Lou and I will never speak its name.
Okay.
It's not that bad.
So I used to work in the area. Well, it is for me. And I was there so often. We had a deal where in between, during the news break, we could sprint down there and just get really caffeined out of our minds and then get back in. So there was actually a coffee drink named after me.
All right.
It was called a Dino Chino.
Dino Chino.
Dino Chino.
All right. So it definitely had milk.
It had
milk?
milk in it. It had, I think, a little caramel in it. There might have been some chocolate as
Okay.
well. So you had the sugar high as well as the caffeine high. And so it was a wonderful thing to have.
Yeah. If someone goes in there now and orders it, are people just going to be confused?
Absolutely.
Okay. So,
Absolutely.
well,
That is
maybe now.
That's like 4 generations ago.
Yeah.
I think the people that are working behind the counter at down at Brewed Awakening now may very well likely have not even been born when the Dino Chino was on the menu. But
Yeah.
you can ask for it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, or I think it was. I would ask. There's a drink that was named after one of the baristas there, April. If you
Yeah,
could ask for
sure.
April without the hazelnut,
Okay.
and that is basically the
Well,
Dino Chino.
you know, speaking of April, it's sort of interesting, and it's points to the value of having local businesses, right? It's because I knew April when she was a teenager, all right, and now she's an adult, and I know a lot of the baristas there who were from the first group of the
Sure.
baristas, and we've grown up together. You don't get that from Starbucks.
No.
But whatever you think about Starbucks coffee, you don't have that sort of connection. Like there's so much happens in Lowell because of that place, and it wouldn't happen if it was a national corporation.
It has absolutely become a pun partially intended here, a very special meeting ground.
Right.
But for Starbucks, I'm one of those guys. I'm okay with Starbucks
Yeah.
for this reason. It's quick and easy.
Sure.
As you talked about your favorite places in the area, man, you hit the ones I like. I'll go to the Java Room,
Yeah.
and I will go down to Brewed Awakening. I'll occasionally venture over to 5 Mill because I'm living in that part, that area of town. But the convenience of a drive-through sometimes, especially if you're on 495 trying to zap up to Maine or zap somewhere else, the idea of just whipping off the road, going through the drive-through, and then getting on the highway, darn it, is just too good to pass by sometimes.
All right,
mean,
I'll be this guy.
Okay.
If I got to do it, I'll be this guy.
Okay.
So where do you rank Dunkin' Donuts and all this stuff?
Dunkin' Donuts is not terrible. I mean, listen, it's
I have
good for me is not good for everyone, and I'm not just saying that to be like an anti-snob.
I have friends who will not go to Dunkin' Donuts if you hold a gun to their head.
Yeah.
And they're not real coffee snobs. They just figure Dunkin' Donuts, no, I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
It can lack character. It can be a little bit ashy sometimes.
But it's a convenience again.
And also, if you're used to
there's a
that and you
convenience.
like that sense of habit, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's like anything. Like can you really say it's as good as some high mountain Jamaican?
No.
But it's not supposed to be, and you get the price hit.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
You're
But
not
Dean
going to
was
pay a
talking-
nominal. You're not going to have to do it in installments to pay for a cup.
Dean was talking about the meeting ground aspect. Dunkin' Donuts is communal. It's regionally communal.
Right, that's
it's
true.
Like, it's a shared experience for everybody.
Sure.
Although I will tell you, I remember I was in Aruba, and I'm walking on the beach. I'm walking on the beach in Aruba, and I was distracted by, well, there are a number of things that could distract you on the beaches in Aruba, and I kind of go thump. I hit a building. It's a Dunkin' Donuts.
Wow.
It is a Dunkin' Donuts on the beach in Aruba. I'm not casting aspersions on the company at large, but that just seems wrong to me at so many different levels. But apparently, New Englanders go to Aruba more than any other island, and say what you will about the Dunkin' people, they know marketing, and they kind of figured, literally on the beach, surrounded by sand, there was a Dunkin' Donuts down there.
Yeah, I mean, from my taste, at the end of the day, I still to get to know the owner. Like, the owner of Coffee and Cotton. Coffee and Cotton is Lowell.
Yep.
And we haven't mentioned that.
In
But
5
that
Mill,
place
yeah.
is great. You
Fabulous
recognize
spot.
people there, and
Great spot.
Yeah, and it's different. Also, you can't go to a Coffee and Cotton up in Portland, Maine, or in New York City. You can only go to Coffee and Cotton in Lowell. You can only go to Brewed Awakening in Lowell. So and there's something to be said for that.
It is interesting to see how this whole coffee culture has really developed in a big way. My family had a restaurant in Algonquin, Maine when I was growing up, so I still have a lot of roots in southern Maine. You go to, say, downtown Kennebunkport, you can't swing a cat by the tail without hitting a coffee place.
Yeah.
I think there are, within a 3-minute walk of each other, 4 or 5. And you're seeing this repeated, I think, in a lot of communities now, that the coffee culture has really started to mature.
Yeah.
How I began drinking coffee, because I never liked coffee as a kid. It's the biggest cliche. You're in Paris. You want to sit at the outdoor cafe.
Right.
Well, what else are you going to do? I began sipping cappuccinos. Now, at that point, I would put so much sugar in it that the spoon could stand up.
Yeah, right.
In it, as I eventually learned to drink coffee, but in the beginning, I liked it about the consistency of maple syrup. By the time I put the sugar in, that's how it started for me. I'm walking around looking at all this an old Three Stooges show called The Parasites.
Okay.
And what else are you going to do? You're going to sit at a cafe and watch the world go by. And when you do that, you start drinking their coffee.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. In French and Italian coffee, the reason why you want sugar is they were getting very inexpensive beans, but they were trying to prepare it artfully. Yeah. That's the Italian model, right? Is when they were in empire, they would get really cheap beans from Africa and roast the hell out of them.
It took me a while to understand the two-tiered coffee houses in Italy, in that if you sit at a table or if you sit at a cafe table outside, it's more expensive than if you just go to the bar. And I would watch these businessmen and all these other people who would run to the bar, una cappuccino or una espresso, and they would throw it down like a shot of malt. Boom!
Yeah.
And then run out. But if you're sitting out at the table and watching the world go by, it's different pricing.
Yeah, it's like you're renting the table.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to going in and just having a shot down, like as I said, like you're doing whiskey, choom, and then go out again.
Yeah. So who are you?
Oh, I'm asking myself. No, as the bio I think says in the magazine, which made it fun to start writing for the magazine, whatever, half a dozen years ago it was. I've never lived more than 10 minutes from the Merrimack River.
Yeah.
So to start writing for Merrimack Valley Magazine was a great thing. And although I've always been based in the area, I've written for a lot of magazines nationally. I worked in Boston for a number of years as a columnist.
Yeah. Didn't you wrote for Rolling Stone, didn't you?
I've done some stuff for Rolling Stone. I've done some stuff for Variety. At one point or another, I'd written for newspapers as a freelancer.
Okay. And were you mostly doing music in the beginning?
In the beginning.
Okay.
Well, I hate to put it this way, but when I was a kid, if there was a show in town, you picked up the paper to see what Dean had to say about it the next day, the review of the concert.
So I spent about 20 years as a writer at the Herald. But
I have as a music nerd, I have to go into. We'll get to the food and everything else. So, best shows you've ever seen.
I was always afraid you were going to ask me this. and so what's happened, because over the years I saw literally thousands and thousands of shows working at the Herald. We figured 20 years I was there. I probably did 3 or 4 shows a week.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember individual shows as much as special moments in each show. What I would probably generally say is, I don't play his music a lot for pleasure at home, but some of the Bruce Springsteen shows I saw. And I will say we forget them, we take them for granted now. I'll tell you right now, some of the Guile shows I saw at the height of their popularity were as good as almost anything I've
missed
seen.
that band.
I've always heard they were fantastic. I never saw them. I heard they were fantastic
Springsteen
live, man.
in his glory years. I mean, I was able to see him when he was still playing colleges here in the area before he graduated. Do you have time for a quick Springsteen story?
Yeah.
I was writing for Rock and Roll magazine in Maine. And as such, we were, as you can imagine, the only rock and roll magazine in northern New England. So whatever clout comes with that, we had it. So he was doing the colleges in the area, so we went to all of them. We went to see him at UNH, we went to see him here, there, and he was playing up in Maine, Colby, I don't even remember, he was playing at Armory. He's playing at an Armory, and this isn't rock and roll folklore, this is firsthand. I saw this, and I've never seen it written about, and I don't know why. Springsteen has always been good about borrowing or stealing the right things. That's what every musician does.
Sure.
The amateur borrows, the professional steals. So he was playing at this armory somewhere in, I don't know where, up in Maine. I don't remember. So the band is wailing away and wailing away and wailing away. And suddenly he starts clutching his heart. And he starts swaying back and forth. Now, still strapped into his Telecaster, of course. And, Clarence is wailing away on the side. He's clutching his on. He's saying, and then 2 EMTs with a stretcher come out from the side of the stage. And they kind of like line up behind him, and the band is still playing, and the audience is going out of its mind, and he's swaying, and the guys are on the stretcher trying to stay with him, and then finally he collapses onto the stretcher. Band still playing, not stopping. Now, I should mention that Jackie Wilson, the legendary R&B singer, did collapse and die on stage of a heart attack. So there's kind of precedent, but you kind of knew that Bruce was just having fun here. Band is just wailing away. The EMTs start carrying him off stage on the stretcher, and of course, just when it's time for the next vocal break, he leaps off the stretcher and runs to the mic. It's a variation of the old James Brown and the Cape routine. I think people who know that will make that connection right away, but it didn't really matter. He did this 4 or 5 times, and people are going out of their minds. Is he? And he'd jump off and kind of just in time for the next thing. So I think in terms of moments like that, but I've always had a soft spot for Clapton. He was the guy that got me going. Interestingly, because of Lowell, I had a brother who was 8 years older than I was, and was pretty musically savvy. And when the Commodore Ballroom existed, which is where the Gallagher Transportation Center is now, he was going to school at Tufts and commuting back and forth, and he and his girlfriend were going to go somewhere, and his girlfriend said, "Oh, why don't you get a little brother with you?" And so I was, 6th grade, 7th grade, and I saw Cream there. And I thought, okay, that's it. Whatever's going to happen, I'm going to be around this all my life. I kind of made that decision at that point in time.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. There's quite a rock and roll history in Lowell. The Allman Brothers, when Dwayne was still alive, played in Lowell. The Doors played in Lowell. Jimmy Page played in Lowell with the Yardbirds, not with Led Zeppelin. And the Kinks, and 10 years after, and so many others over the years. The band had played in Lowell. Springsteen played in Lowell as a solo act. So it's quite an interesting rock and roll history in Lowell. A number of albums have been recorded live in Lowell, and of course, with Dylan played in Lowell with the Rolling Thunder Review with Kerouac's grave there.
He's still playing in Lowell.
Yeah,
he was at the
Songus,
that's right.
It was just at the Songus. And with Kerouac's grave there, a number of artists have come through at one point or another. But that is how it all started. And when I think of great shows, I think of specific moments within them. But if you're going to ask me offhand some of them, I would say Springsteen and the Giles Band were just all cylinders, all cylinders.
The Giles Band on New Year's Eve at the Garden.
Oh.
And the opening act was John Kiley playing Christmas carols. They just wheeled him out. The guy who played organ for Fenway Park in Boston Garden.
Okay. All right.
They just wheeled him out with an organ on stage. He played Christmas carols for 20 minutes, and then Giles ripped the joint open.
Wow.
Yeah.
But, other moments that come to mind, seeing the Clash, their first tour of America. I was never into the punk new wave thing. I was editing a rock and roll magazine, and the guys around me were just talking about that. But I was a little hesitant and seemed just a little too raw for me. But seeing the Clash at the Harvard Square Theater, the only thing I can possibly liken it to was seeing the Stones probably in '63 or '64. It was just explosive. It was just nuclear. And I knew, okay, these guys are the real thing.
Yeah. So at a certain point, things change, and you start writing about other topics like food. Like, when does food come into this?
Well, as a freelancer, you realize the amount you make is limited only by how much you can and are willing to write. And the more you can write about, then the more money you can make.
Yeah.
And so what happened is I was writing about music at first, and, for little tiny newspapers in the area, the Chelmsford Sentinel, and some of those papers. And then I began continuing to write about music, and for some of these guys, I said, I can write about other things. So I actually covered real news stories. And, you have your pivotal moments in life. I remember I was covering a Board of Health meeting in Chelmsford, and we spent 3 hours discussing whether these people should be allowed to have a pig on their property or not. And I remember saying to myself, oh, I am so done with covering anything like real news. Why would I ever want to do that when I can live a fantasy life just covering music and all this other stuff? That's it. No more politics, no more hard news, no more nothing. And I began writing about food because my wife mentioned that it would be a good idea. The Little Sun needed a restaurant critic. And although I had been doing a lot of freelancing about various subjects, and like the Little Sun needed a weekly restaurant critic way back when. And I think in the Old Testament at some point the Lord tells Abraham, listen to your wife. And I said, well, how much of a background do I have in food? And she said, you're Greek, you know how to write, and you grew up in a restaurant. And at that point in time...
Wait, so you grew up in a restaurant?
My family had a restaurant.
Oh, in Maine?
Yeah, up in Algonquin, Maine. So I grew up in a restaurant, doing a little bit of everything up there. And when I started writing for the Sun, the restaurant scene was a little different than it was now. And so I began doing it for them. And for 12 years, I did a review every week, which is 600, 700, wow. I think. And I think of some of the dives we did now, and I just wanted to laugh because it was just hard to find something different to do every week. To do that now, what a fabulous thing that would be. Back, we're talking 15, 20 years ago, maybe. Not so much, you know. But that started. And the grind of doing that every week was great practice.
Yeah. So you went to Smith & Dove for the January issue of Merrimack Valley Magazine.
Yeah.
So it seemed like you really liked that place. We talked about it a little bit.
You know, it's very rare for me to go somewhere and enjoy everything from the very beginning to the very end. I liked everything that we had there. And you know, I'm not a pushover. I try to give restaurateurs the benefit of the doubt. I grew up in a restaurant. I know that things can go wrong. I know what can happen. And so a lot of times as I'm writing, I'm not so concerned about maybe what went wrong than what do they do to fix it, because things are going to go wrong. But when we went to Smith & Dove, I'll tell you down the line, even beginning with, you know, I saw pretzel bread on the menu as an appetizer, and I thought, well, you know, we should try something like that. And there are these individual little pretzel balls with a special mustard-based dipping sauce, and I'm thinking, I'm done. This is great. And right down the line, I was very impressed with the quality of everything, the entrees that we had, the desserts we had, the service from the get-go, because it's a new spot right in downtown Andover. I think it was a former bookstore, someone told me, in a barn.
Yeah.
You don't think of barns in downtown Andover very much, but there was one there. And I, you know, my test for me is always, would I go back, as I say, as a civilian? Yeah, we're going to go back with friends. There are friends that we need to take out to dinner, and we owe them one, and we're going to go there.
We tend in the magazine to highlight the positive. It's the nature of the magazine.
Yeah.
It's the brand, and we're probably not going to write about something that isn't worth people's time. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting sort of behind the scenes, because I can gauge your true enthusiasm, and I felt in this one I could kind of tell you really like this place.
You know, and that was something that the Sun wanted to do when I started writing, going out there and just blowing someplace out of the water. There's a place for that kind of restaurant critic, but for a paper like the Sun, they really said, you know, if it's really, really bad, let us know. And so, you know, I learned to kind of like focus on the positive and make some notes about things that can be improved. And
I mean, there's also so much. There's just a massive amount of criticism out there.
Oh, yeah.
Of bad criticism of every little thing.
Oh, of course.
I mean, you read the reviews of Moby Dick on Amazon. You know, one of the greatest novels ever written. It's like a 2.5-star review. People talk about the problems with the dialogue and the problems with the writing. It was Herman Melville. There's no problem with Moby Dick.
You're right.
It's a 5-star. Everyone, Moby Dick is 5 stars.
Well, he could have based it more in reality.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
too much plot armor.
It's true. You see it at almost every level now. So I think,
and this happens to restaurants, and it's a problem for them too, right?
I also think, you know, the web's a wonderful thing, clearly, with what we're doing now as a podcast. But I think the web has also given a lot of people more voice than they deserve.
Right.
Because if someone just has an axe to grind or just has had a bad day, they can go on the web and just nuke a place, and it gets worldwide exposure. and there's no credence behind it. But how do people know that?
Right. Well, we were talking about this in the sort of pre-podcast when we were playing around with it. And there's a great thing about having a personality behind a review, which is you can actually even disagree with that person.
Sure.
Someone can read your reviews all the time and think, I don't see eye to eye with him, but I like to read because maybe if he doesn't like a certain thing that I like, I'll know I can go there.
Or
if
you
he
can
likes a certain
triangulate.
thing-
I knew it when I was reading his reviews of the shows back in the day. I knew what he liked and what he didn't like, so I could take what he said and I said, well, he didn't go for that, but I might.
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I like. He doesn't.
And
like
there's a huge value, and that only comes from having a personality.
Oh, yeah.
Just not some random semi-anonymous or anonymous voice on the internet where you don't know, does that person know anything about food? Did they grow up in Maine and work in restaurants? Have they been writing for, and you have to now look for clues. You look at the grammar, you look at, you have to now do some work to try to figure out whether that Yelp review critic has any validity to what they're saying.
I agree with you completely. And my point of reference is that was when I was growing up, I used to read everything I could about music and music reviews. And I knew some of these critics very well. And I could tell there were things that they loved that I wouldn't touch with a 20-foot pole because I knew their taste and their style so well. And there are things that they loathed, and I said, oh boy, that's for me, and also in between. And I think that's what can make a critic effective is when you've read him or her enough to understand, as Lou said, their value system, and to know how it compares with yours. You say, okay, I don't think I'm going to like this or that, but it sounds like an interesting place to check out or something like that. I think that is helpful. It works at two levels. I think for any critic, you want to turn people on to good stuff and protect them from the bad stuff. Everyone said every music critic actually wanted to be a musician. No. I think you want to just turn people on to good stuff. You say, wow, I'm really jazzed about this at any level. I mean, at one point or another, at the Herald and the other papers, I've been a movie critic, I've been a theater critic, I've been a television critic. I wrote a comedy column for 20 years at the Herald about stand-up comedy. And in all of those things, I think that's what you want to do as a critic. You want to try and turn people on to the good stuff and try and protect them from the bad stuff if you can.
I'm not surprised you wrote a comedy column. And I have to say, on our website, some of the kind of short humorous pieces you do are some of the we get more readers for those than anything. Get a lot of attention. So when you're writing when you're writing about driving in downtown Lowell, people love that stuff.
I did something on the rules of pickup basketball in the Lowell area. And what I did is I would focus on stand-up comedy. But then for a few years at the Herald, Tony V and I did co-write a humor column. We actually did do a humor column, which was more about us coming up with stuff as opposed to that. But nevertheless, I think any critic, you serve that purpose. You're a consumer guide.
So this is positive, but I have to go a little bit negative because I always you're the guy in the restaurants.
Yeah.
Pet peeves on restaurants. Are you seeing any trends that you don't care for? Are there things you're seeing over and over again that are driving you nuts?
Well, one of the things that it drives me crazy is, here's a pet peeve, is when no one puts salt and pepper shakers on the tables anymore. They don't put salt and pepper shakers on the tables anymore. And now, when I was at Smith & Dove, I might have come up with an answer. They, when I asked, because sometimes you do that and you feel like an orphan in a Dickens novel asking for more gruel. And you want to say, I'm an adult, darn it. I'm going to season this the way I want. I understand the chef wants you to eat it the way it was brought to the table. But I've been around on this planet long enough to know it needs stinking salt. Bring me salt. So that was one of the things that really irritates me. But I'm thinking now every restaurant is trying to make ends meet. If you've got 60 tables, that's 60 salt and pepper shakers. But if you only bring it on request, you may only need 4. Maybe that's part of it. Yeah. I don't know. We went to Smith & Dove when I did that because they didn't have it there. But when I did that, they brought it over and they left it on the table. And instead of saying, is that enough, sir? Would you like some more? And you want to say, please, and you want to say, no, leave the stinking thing on the table. So that's one of my pet peeves. The other one is, and this has come and gone over the years, and I understand the process, but when you have a server that interacts with you like they're auditioning for summer stock, I was a waiter, so it's not that I can't commiserate, but you want to say, be polite, be courteous, be efficient, and shut up.
Yeah. So you like the Italian, like an Italian cafe, right? They bring
Yeah,
you coffee,
know,
then
and
they
you
leave
wanna
you
talk,
alone
and
to enjoy.
You want a little interaction. You want it to be pleasant and the like. But sometimes, as I said,
Becomes
it's
work.
as if they're practicing their next role
Yeah,
on you.
yeah.
And you want to say, no, really, please. So those are the two of the things that I think at the moment.
Yeah. So
come
when
to
you're
mind.
not writing food reviews and food writing in general for Merrimack Valley Magazine, what else are you doing with your time?
I'm still continuing to do some freelancing for some different publications. Up until recently,
Mostly food writing? Or-
no, I just did something. There's a newspaper up in Kennebunker, Port Maine area that I've started doing some work for. I've done
okay.
some.
What are they called?
Some writing. It's a tourist in town.
Okay.
Tourist in town. It comes out every couple of weeks during the summer, and high summer it's in the weekly. And a friend of mine who was up there said, "You got to start writing for us." And I'm up there enough where it's fun to do so. I'm doing some food writing, but I've been doing a little bit of everything. I just did something.
Can
on,
people read it on the,
Yeah,
on the web?
it is. All of the issues are available
Okay.
online.
In the
Tour-
the website? Off the top of your
Tourist
head?
and Town. I think if you Google Tourist in Town and Kennebunk or Kennebunkport, it'll come up.
Okay.
So there's a fair amount of food writing. I'm doing some interviews with chefs up there because there's a fabulous food scene in southern Maine that's growing
sure.
up as well. But I just did something recently with. There used to be a Springsteenian kind of musician who worked out of Maine called Bill Chinnick. If you haven't heard of him, there's no reason why you would have. But he was his tagline was "There is a legend in the North Country," and he was a big guy and a dynamic figure. And actually, it came originally from New Jersey and had been in a band in New Jersey and moved on. And his replacement was a skinny kid called Bruce, literally. And for a while, he had Mad Dog Lopez in his band as a drummer who had been in Springsteen's band. So he used to play every roadhouse, every bar, and the like. But he was a phenomenal performer. And they just re-released one of his albums, an Atlantic album, and they just remixed it because it came out during the height of the disco era, so they toned down the guitars and toned up the beats, and the suits in New York did everything to eviscerate everything that this guy was, and they just did a remix on it. So I just did a piece on him and who he was and how good it is to have this album out. So it's a little bit of everything.
Okay. And people can listen to you on the radio.
Not anymore.
Oh.
I had for about a half
But
dozen.
you still...
I do. I take that back. I will. It's very funny now. For about half a dozen years, I was on BC as a host, but it tended to be overnight, so it was killing me. It was a lot of fun, but it was just killing me. And so I said, I got to leave. But I'm now regularly on as a guest on Morgan White's show. So once every 3 or 4 months,
Okay.
I'm doing the overnights.
What
And
time, and do you know that?
It's usually midnight. I don't know when I'm going to be on next, but midnight to 2 or 3, and I'll always have stuff
Okay.
and stories that we'll talk about. But during the time I was in BC, it was a lot of fun. I did have, I had a lot of food people on and a lot of musicians on too.
Yeah. So in the magazine, we have this this newsletter called 8 Great Things to Do This Weekend. And I'm going to talk about 8 great things we have this weekend, and let's kind of talk about them and
Sure.
see what's going on in the Merrimack Valley. The first one is on Thursday, tomorrow night, January 9th. Tuscan Market's pastry chefs are teaching the ropes behind making one of your favorite desserts, I think, tiramisu.
Sure.
Yeah. So if you
How
go to
good is that,
I know,
huh?
right? So
Oh,
if you want to
man.
learn, Tuscan Market in Salem, New Hampshire, Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. Number 2, the Greater Lowell Community Foundation has announced the 2020 Arts at GLCF exhibition schedule. The schedule features 4 local artists, starting with Maxine Farkas, a mixed media artist, community organizer, and independent curator who is trained as a historical geographer. Her work has been shown in England, France, and Japan. The exhibit runs from January 10 to April 10 at the Greater Lowell Community Foundation's office on Merrimack Street.
Very nice.
Number 3, a Rolling Stones tribute band, Satisfaction, which Rolling Stone magazine calls one of the best tribute shows in the world.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
You've seen them? Okay, all right. Well, they're going to be playing Blue Ocean Music Hall Friday at 8 p.m. Number 4, this is not in the Merrimack Valley, but sometimes we cover things outside of the valley if we think they'll be of interest. Over at the Fitchburg Art Museum, they have a show called Scenes in Circulation, Winslow Homer's America. And Winslow Homer's a great landscape painter. You probably know the landscape painting.
Legendary.
But before he did that, he did magazine work. And he did these woodblock prints. And he tended to show, stuff about people working and leisure and picnics, that kind of stuff, but set against landscape. So you can see the Winslow Homer that's coming down the pike in his magazine work. And if you haven't been to the Fitchburg Art Museum, have you guys been?
I have not.
Oh, it's fantastic. Really, really great. And speaking of coffee, if you're in the neighborhood, Strong Style Coffee's down the street there. Really, really fantastic, newish coffee shop in Fitchburg that's doing everything right. So that's a little trip outside the valley if you're getting, you know.
I think it's always great to see exhibits where you understand better the artist and his evolution to as they became what we know them to be.
Yeah, and evolution is key here because he stopped doing this magazine work once the paintings took off. So you're really kind of seeing the sketches of what's to come. So this sounds fantastic. Number 5, bring the family down to Lowell National Historical Park for hands-on history weaving workshop. Learn how to weave on a loom and find out how cloth was made by hand. Use the art of weaving in some make and take activities for all ages. It's a free drop-in event. All are welcome. And this is going to be at the Boot Cotton Mills Museum from 1 to 4 p.m. on Saturday,
People
January
forget
11th.
that we have a national park
Oh,
in
yeah.
downtown Lowell, and it is a wonderful thing. So when I mention this, it's not demeaning the park at all, but I always wonder, these guys go to school and these gals go to school to become park rangers. So they graduate, they get their, whatever their park ranger degree is, and they're waiting for their assignment. Am I going to Yosemite? Am I going to go to Grand Teton?
Yeah, yeah.
And they say, you're going to Lowell. So it might take a little bit of an adjustment for these people until they get there and they see that it's an urban national park,
Right.
and just très cool.
I mean, it's
très cool. It really is.
I mean, some of the people who go into that service, I mean, there are people who do it because they want to live alone. They want to hunt boars and they want to go out in the woods, and that's their thing, and that's where they want to go to Montana, and that's it. But if you're interested in history, right, and if you're interested in kind of exploring what's underneath the surface in urban spaces, that's got to be a great gig.
And
they
a lot
do-
of them are from, a lot of the rangers are from the Lowell area,
Yeah,
in talking to them in the lake. But I always thought, oh, I'm ready to go into the great wild. Well, you go to Lowell.
Yeah. So speaking of kind of hidden gems, number 6, on Saturday, the Museum of Printing in Haverhill is celebrating its acquisition of the Shapler Typographic Ephemera Collection. So you can stop by between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. and check out Kim Whiting's article in the January edition of Merrimack Valley Magazine. I have it here. How does that look, Lou? Can everybody see that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, she wrote this article, and we just put it online this week, and got a wonderful reaction. I mean,
Great.
A lot of people were kind of commenting about the Museum of Printing. A lot of people didn't really know it existed, and it's this fantastic... Have you been there?
Again, I have not, and
Well, let's go
sometimes
sometime.
that's
Some Saturday,
that's the
let's go.
problem sometimes of living in the area, because you're aware of these things and you can always go tomorrow,
Right.
But you never go because you can go tomorrow, and you got to stop and say,
Yeah.
no, I'm going to do this, so I'm going to do that.
Okay, well, some Saturday, you and I, we're going to go.
Sure.
Okay. 7, create your own sea glass art creation with shells, sand, and sea glass. Kid-friendly event hosted at the Canvas Roadshow in Bedford, New Hampshire. We'll have plenty of materials to work with. Attendees are welcome to bring their own supplies. This starts at 2 p.m. And now, number 8, roughly 50 years. Here's some music stuff for you. Roughly 50 years after its original release, The Who's classic rock opera Tommy has been fully realized as a full-length bluegrass tribute.
What?
Featuring Missouri's Hillbenders. You got to check them out on YouTube. You got to check out the Hillbenders and watch them play the Who music.
You almost have to, Dean, don't you?
Tommy, can you hear me? Dun, 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 dun,
That's what it
dun,
sounds
dun,
like.
dun, dun. You know what?
They're good, and I think one of the guys in the band is like one of the founders of South by Southwest.
Oh,
So
yeah.
These are legit, people doing
yeah.
this.
Hey, a good song is a good song,
Yeah.
and it will do well in almost any sort of arrangement.
Yeah.
So
and sometimes it gives
that's
you a fresh
fascinating to me.
Like I've
Sure.
heard bluegrass bands do AC/DC.
Yeah.
If
Oh,
you've
that's
heard
right.
this,
Oh, yeah.
And it gives
Yeah.
you a new
Oh, sure.
perspective when you take things out of their context.
Yeah.
Right?
It's great.
So anyways,
great concept.
There we go. That's at the Firehouse Center for the Arts this Sunday at 7 p.m. And I have a bonus event that's not this weekend. You ever had the Flaming Wheel pasta? Where
Oh, yeah.
You have that? Okay. So Grazie and Drake it. Every
Yes.
Tuesday and Wednesday. Chef Benny is out there. Have you met Chef Benny?
I have not.
I interviewed him. He's great. He's very, very funny and fantastic. So if you haven't been to Grazie, they do the thing where have you had this where they take the
No.
big Parmesan cheese wheel and they carve it out and they do the pasta and they set it on fire?
Oh, God,
Use a
no.
little
big
brandy,
Fiat.
I think, and they actually mix it up.
God,
So
I
you're
know what I'm
melting the
doing tonight.
cheese in the wheel, and then mixing it.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's so delicious. All right, so that's every Tuesday and Wednesday at Grazie Italian Restaurant.
Nice spot.
In Drake it. Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Four Oaks Country Club. Okay, so the final thing we do in the 495 podcast is this little thing called Little Bits. In the magazine, we have a section sometimes called Little Bits. There's little factoids, little stories, little kind of hidden things about the Merrimack Valley. And we're going to end with this and talk a little bit about Leonard Bernstein, who was born in Lawrence in 1918. You know what his dad did?
Baker?
Oh, close. Baking
I took
the
a
brains.
shot.
Yeah, a bookstore owner.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his dad was a bookstore owner, and the bookstore was at the corner of Amesbury and Essex
That would have
Streets.
been about my 2,000th guest.
Well, it makes sense
Yeah.
for someone who was, you know, for the sort of skills you need to be.
Just before cowboy, right?
Just
right.
yeah.
So, he's best known for West Side Story.
Sure.
If you don't know who he is, he died in 1990, which seems kind of recent for me. I think
When's
of
the
him
last
as
time
being
you saw West Side Story, the movie?
long time.
They're redoing it. There's going to be a new one out, new version out soon.
Because I was just going to say, if you watch West Side Story now, and I just watched it like a month ago, there's no way they could do it now.
But you could say that about
no
so
way
much.
they could do this now.
Sure.
It would be too politically correct. Is that what you're saying?
It was incredible. I was cringing watching it. And I'm not a politically correct guy. And oh God,
Yeah.
you'd get killed
But
for this.
even the politically correct stuff from 20 years ago, like a lot of that wouldn't fly. And you know,
Well, that's the hue and cry with, and I'll just take this quick. Comedians today, it's so difficult for them because people, A, as you said, are so easily offended these days, and B, the whole idea of comedy is to push the envelope.
Right.
But if you push it in almost any direction now, people start wagging their fingers, and so a lot of comedians are having trouble trying to find that line.
As evidenced by Ricky Gervais.
Well, actually, Ricky Gervais is almost the interesting counterpoint, right? Because he goes on and does everything that you think is just going to set off bombs, right? And his follower count goes way, way up on Twitter. He suddenly has all these fans.
He's getting some blowback.
He's getting some blowback, but in general, I thought the publicity was massively in favor of Ricky Gervais.
Oh, it was so awesome.
Well, they knew what he was going to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And Gervais, I have mixed emotions about some of the stuff that he he says and does, but they knew they were going to get. At least in this case,
right?
You can't say shocked. I say you want to say it's the fifth time, lady. What do you think's going to do? He's become a Benedictine monk in the meantime.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was great, and just seeing him kind of sip the beer and say, "I don't care, I don't care," and it was so refreshing. I've seen him do that too, and I think that was kind of him at his best on that show. So but at the same time, he can get away with it, and I think he can get away with it because people suspect, with a lot of great comedians, that underneath he's just like a decent guy. And a lot of times,
I don't get that impression at all. I think.
No,
but that's what comedy used to be.
Misanthropic, sour, dour individual.
Okay, misanthropic. Okay, maybe, but you sort of feel like he's on the right side of things. Like you feel like he'd open the door.
He
for
balances
your
things
grandmother.
off, perhaps.
Right.
He would open the door for your grandmother and then push her through it. I think is what he would probably.
All right.
Comedy used to be a process of making you uncomfortable, though. It was self-examination.
Right.
It was getting you to look at yourself and make yourself uncomfortable.
Sure.
And that's what comedy used to be.
When I was on BZ, I'd have comics on all the time because it was an area I covered, and I knew these guys I could talk to them at a different level, and they've almost all given up any political humor. Yeah. None.
Right.
One side or the other, because whatever they would do, whichever rail they would third rail they would touch, a portion of the audience would just go nuts. So they've just given up on it. That's too bad.
It's too bad, but it also sort of points to something that's going on right here, which I think is unusual in history, which is there's a type of factionalism or a type of division between people where people are no longer like, united, we can all kind of see the same on this. The lines are being drawn, right? Yeah. And I mean, to me, from my perspective, this is something that's unfortunate because I like to look for common ground, right?
I think history's taught us that any democracy lasted about 200 plus years. So, the United States is now in that zone.
Right.
How does it handle that?
Yeah.
That's going to be the interesting question.
Sure. Absolutely.
Wow. Deep stuff.
Yeah.
I'd see
the deep stuff.
Gears turning there. All right. So anyways, Dean Johnson, Lou Blasi, I'm Doug Sparks, editor-in-chief of Merrimack Valley Magazine. I'm going to be here next week, and the special guest is going to be someone I think that maybe Kevin Harkins, the photographer for the magazine.
What a talent.
Speaking of food photographer. So Kevin Harkins going to be here on the 15th, and we'll see you again then.